On a June night in 1841, Colonel Edmund Thornhill summoned his domiciliary disciplinarian to the cartoon allowance of his Dallas Canton acreage and bogus an advertisement that larboard them speechless. His wife, Virginia, who advised over £400 and could about leave her chair, would be placed beneath the affliction of Silas, a dwarf bondservant he had purchased 3 months beforehand for the specific sum of $400. What the domiciliary did not know, what would alone be apparent decades afterwards through abstracts activate bankrupt in a Charleston vault, was that this was not an act of animality or madness. It was the aboriginal date of a medical agreement so advancing that 7 bodies had already died in its development, and an abstruse association of affluent Southerners had invested bags of dollars cat and mouse for its success. The Association of Medical Analysis kept accurate records, and those annals exceed actually what Colonel Thornhill believed would appear aback he gave his dying wife to a bondservant whose clarity was assertive captivated the key to her salvation. Afore we abide with the adventure of Thornhill Estate and the daydream that abundant abaft its bankrupt doors, accomplish abiding to subscribe to Liturgy of Abhorrence and hit that notification bell, and acquaint us in the comments what accompaniment or burgle are you alert from. Now, let us alight into one of Alabama's darkest and best anxiously hidden secrets. What happened in the weeks afterwards that advertisement would shock alike the Colonel himself, and the accuracy would be active for generations. Colonel Edmund Thornhill alternate to Dallas Canton in backward February 1839. His larboard arm annealed from a Creek warrior's tomahawk that had burst cartilage at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend 25 years prior. The affliction had never appropriately healed, abrogation him with a abiding admonition of Andrew Jackson's attack and a morphine annex that bounded physicians aside about in private. At 52, Thornhill agitated himself with the adamant abode of aggressive discipline, his gray eyes perpetually narrowed as if analysis adversary territory. His plantation, affiliated from his father-in-law afterwards the old man's adequate afterlife from apoplexy in 1837, sprawled aloft 1,800 acreage of prime affection acreage forth the Alabama River. The estate itself rose 3 belief from the red adobe earth, a Greek awakening analysis with arty white columns that seemed to adjudicator anyone abutting up the affiliated oak-lined drive. Locals alleged it Thornhill Manor, admitting the acreage accomplishment still bore the name Ridgemont, a detail that would afterwards prove significant. The abode independent 23 rooms, best of which remained bankrupt and unused, their appliance draped in white bedding like active corpses. The basement, which affiliated far added than all important for archetypal base cellar, was anxiously off banned to all domiciliary slaves, except for 2 trusted men who never batten of what they saw below. Dallas Canton in 1839 was a abode of adamant hierarchies and bond rules. The Canton bench of Cahaba, anchored at the assemblage of the Alabama and Cahaba rivers, had briefly served as Alabama's accompaniment basic afore calamity collection the government to Montgomery. The displacement larboard Cahaba with a appropriate character, a boondocks of achromatic amplitude busy by aloft legislators, aggressive planters, and the affectionate of men who beheld the borderland as a class for amusing experimentation. The citizenry numbered about 4,000 with disciplinarian outnumbering chargeless whites by about 3 to 1. Affection was king, but beneath the agnostic actualization of acreage society, darker currents flowed. Vigilia Thornhill, built-in Velia, Catherine Ridgemont, had already been advised the anxiety of adaptable society. Portraits from her adolescence showed a attenuate woman with aerial actualization and able aphotic eyes. But by 1839, at 41 years of age, she had adapted into article that affable association struggled to acknowledge. Her condition, which avant-garde anesthetic would admit as a astringent thyroid disorder, accumulated with edema, had acquired her weight to airship to an estimated 400 pounds. She could know best to send stairs afterwards assistance. Her breathing, abnormally in Alabama's airless summer humidity, came in affected gasps that could be heard throughout the manor's aboriginal floor. What bogus Virgilia's bearings decidedly adverse was her mind, which remained as aciculate as ever, trapped central analysis that betrayed her with every movement. She spent her canicule in a distinctively able armchair in the cartoon room, amidst by medical texts that she apprehended voraciously, badly analytic for some explanation, some cure for her condition. Her husband's attitude adjoin her had adapted from a broad affability to article that agents aside resembled analytic fascination. He watched her the way a naturalist adeptness beam a specimen, demography addendum in a covering account he agitated everywhere. The domiciliary agents consisted of 19 slaves, best of whom formed the fields and lived in the abode abaft the Capitol House. But 6 abode agents witnessed the appropriate dynamics of the Thornhill alliance firsthand. There was Esther, the arch cook, a woman in her 50s whose aching easily testified to years of labor. Her daughter, Celia, served as Vigilia's claimed attendant, a position that appropriate acumen and aphotic loyalty. 2 brothers, Marcus and Isaiah, maintained the area and served as the colonel's claimed attendants, their faces anxiously bare whenever they assisted him with his backward night trips to the basement. An earlier woman alleged Judith managed the household circadian operations with quiet efficiency, and an adolescent babe alleged Penny, no added than 12, bankrupt the Admiral apartment and was instructed never to admission the colonel's clandestine study. Into this aberrant domiciliary in March 1839 came Silas. The bondservant Bargain Inadaptable took abode on a boiling Tuesday morning aback the air afraid so abundant with damp that men's shirt collars angled afore noon. Colonel Thornhill had Catholic the 100 meters accurately for this auction, admitting he told no one accurate purpose. The Bargain House, a athletic brick architecture abreast the docks area ships from Africa and the Caribbean unloaded their animal cargo, rired of army bodies, fear, and the accurate affliction of bodies actuality awash like livestock. Silas stood on the bargain block at actually 11 o'clock, and the crowd's acknowledgement was immediate. At 3 anxiety and 9 in tall, he was a dwarf, a action that bogus him accompanying alluring and advancing to the accumulated planters. But what actually bent absorption was his bearing. Unlike the added disciplinarian who kept their eyes downcast, Silas met the boring of abeyant buyers with an abashing directness. His body, admitting diminutive, was effectively built, his accoutrements disproportionately able-bodied for his size. His face asperous aloft his 30-something years, bore a blister that ran from his larboard temple to his jaw. A gift from some able violence. The auctioneer, a ashamed man alleged Dempsey, seemed uncomfortable. This actuality is Silas, brought up from the Creole auctions in New Orleans. Antecedent client was a drive. Beauchamp of Louisiana, asleep beneath adverse circumstances. Silas is literate, speaks French and English, has adeptness of alleviative plants, and assertive added specialized skills. That byword added specialized abilities acquired murmurs in the crowd. Several planters exchanged glances and absolved away. In the bondservant abridgment of 1839, assertive euphemisms agitated aphotic implications. A community bondservant was dangerous. One with specialized abilities was potentially lethal. But Colonel Thornhill stepped forward, his face betraying no emotion. What actually are these specialized skills, Mr. Dempsey? The agent leaned down, blurred his voice, admitting several others could still hear. The antecedent client acclimated him for ancestry purposes. Colonel claims he sired 17 children, all healthy, all valuable. Additionally says he has adeptness of analysis and medical procedures. Assisted the doctor in his practice. Some catechism about the attributes of that practice, which is why we are affairs him cheap. Thornhill's eyes narrowed with interest. How cheap? $400, sir. Bisected what you would pay for a prime acreage hand, because his concrete limitations. The behest was brief. An agriculturalist from Montgomery offered $300. Addition went to $350. But aback Thornhill alleged out $400 in articulation that BKED no competition, the others fell silent. Money afflicted hands, affirmation were signed, and by noon, Silas was shackled in the aback of Thornhill's wagon, Alpha the affiliated adventure to Dallas County. They Catholic for 3 days, endlessly at roadside taverns, area Silas remained chained in the wagon bed. Thornhill about battened to his new acquisition, except to action baptize and adamantine biscuits. But on the added night, camped beside the alley beneath the moon that angry the Alabama mural argent and strange, the colonel assuredly bankrupt his silence. Can you actually read, Silas? Yes, master. The articulation was deep, incongruous, advancing from such a baby analysis with an emphasis that appropriate apprenticeship aloft what any bondservant should possess, and your adeptness of medicine. Is that accurate, or was Dempsey inflating your value? Silas angry his head, a fair Thornhill's boring in the firelight. Dr. Beauchamp able me for 8 years, master. He believed that baby easily were advantageous for assertive aerial procedures. I assisted in over 200 surgeries afore his death. And what acquired his death? Yellow agitation, master. Aforementioned communicable that dead bisected of New Orleans in 37. Thornhill advised him for an affiliated moment. You are lying. I arrested the afterlife annal afore I came to Mobile. Dr. Henry Beauchamp died of arsenic poisoning. The delving could not actuate if it was adventitious or murder. You were awash by his added accurately to abolish you from New Orleans afore assertive questions could be asked. Silas said nothing, but article flickered in his eyes, article that adeptness except bin account for the colonel's thoroughness, or conceivably acceptance of affiliated artful intelligence. I do not affliction what happened in New Orleans, Thornhill continued. That is the past. What affairs is what you can do for me? I accept assignment that requires discretion, intelligence, and a able stomach. Do you acquire those qualities? What affectionate of work, master? Medical work, alpha in nature. You will abetment me, and in return, you will accept a clandestine allowance in the manner, bigger aliment than acreage slaves, and admission to my medical library. You will additionally accept assertive privileges that others do not enjoy. But you will allege to no one about what we do. If you abandon my confidence, your afterlife will be apathetic and creative. Do we accept anniversary other? Yes, master. Good. Thornhill leaned back, his damaged arm cradled adjoin his chest. A back-we admission at the manor, you will accommodate my wife. You will be respectful, obedient, and alert to her needs. She suffers from an action that accepted anesthetic cannot cure. I intend to try anarchistic methods. They acclimatized at Thornhill Estate on a Thursday afternoon. A back storm clouds aggregate on the border and the air crackled with preterm electricity. The domiciliary disciplinarian came out to accommodate the wagon, their faces anxiously aloof as they admired the new arrival. Silas, now unchained but acutely acquainted that escape into the surrounding countryside would be baleful for addition of his characteristic appearance, climbed bottom ward and stood cat and mouse for instructions. Vigilia Thornhill acclimatized him in the cartoon room, built-in her able armchair abreast the window area, afternoon ablaze aflame her with atrocious clarity. She wore a dress of abysmal blooming cottony that had been distinctively complete to board her size, and her hair, still blubbery and aphotic admitting her age, was abiding in an busy appearance that appropriate vanity had not actually dyed oral her. So this is the one, she said, her articulation decidedly melodious. She advised Silas with the aforementioned analytic disengagement her bedmate had displayed. Come closer. Let me see you properly. Silas obeyed, dispatch into the light. At his height, he was about at eye akin with Vigilia, admitting her built-in position. She able out and took his button in her hand, axis his face ancillary to side, analytical him like a horse buyer, blockage teeth. Edmund says, you accept medical knowledge. Yes, mistress. And ancestry capabilities. Her accent was bulk of fact, discussing him as one adeptness altercate livestock genetics. 17 children, I am told, all healthy. So I accept been told, mistress, I never met best of them. They were awash anon afterwards birth. Article flickered aloft Vigilia's face. An affect too quick to identify. Of advance they were. That is the attributes of our appropriate institution, is it not? But we are not captivated in children, Silas. We accept added goals. My bedmate has explained annihilation to you, I assume. No, mistress. Archetypal Edmund. He enjoys his mysteries. She appear his button and sat back. Her animation affected from alike that baby exertion. I am dying, Silas. Slowly, yes, but inevitably. This analysis is antibacterial itself, growing aloft and weaker with anniversary accidental month. Accepted doctors action leeches and mercury, adoration and resignation. But my bedmate and I accept there are added possibilities. Earlier knowledge, alpha procedures, methods that the medical enactment considers bent or alike heretical. Colonel Thornhill entered the room, his boots beat on the able floor. That is abundant for now, Vigilia. Silas needs to see his abode and accept his duties afore we altercate theory. Theory. Vigilia laughed, a complete that attenuated into coughing. Is that what we are calling it, Edmund? How alluringly academic. Thornhill's jaw tightened. Celia, appearance Silas to the baby allowance off the kitchen. Off. He will booty his commons with the abode agents and appear me in my abstraction anniversary morning at 6 o'clock sharp. Silas, you are dismissed. But as Silas followed Celia out, he heard Vigilia's voice. Lower now speaking to her husband. He is perfect, Edmund. Actually what we need. Aback do we begin. Soon, my dear. Actual soon. The allowance Silas was acclimatized had already been a pantry, about ample abundant for the attenuated bed and baby table it now contained, but it had a lock on the inside, a affluence no acreage bondservant would any time know, and a window that disregarded the kitchen garden. Added importantly, it was abreast the basement door, and in the nights that followed, Silas would lie animate alert to sounds that drifted up from below. Footsteps, deadened voices, and occasionally a complete that adeptness except been errant or adeptness except been article abroad entirely. His duties began artlessly enough. Anniversary morning he abounding Colonel Thornhill in the study, a allowance lined with bookshelves complete volumes on medicine, anatomy, acclimatized philosophy, and capacity added obscure. Thornhill would behest addendum while Silas wrote in a bright hand, documenting observations about Vigilia's condition. Her weight abstinent on appropriate calibration brought from mobile, her aliment assimilation anxiously monitored, her animation patterns, the abscess in her ankles, the affection of her sleep. But there were added notebooks, too, earlier ones that Thornhill sometimes consulted but never let Silas touch. Their covering covers were decrepit with substances that adeptness except been ink or adeptness except been blood. And the glimpses Silas bent of their capacity showed anatomical assets of absorption and detail that appropriate actual ascertainment of a advancing nature. "You are apprehensive about my methods," Thornhill said one morning, communicable Silas staring at one of the bankrupt notebooks. "That is natural. Curiosity is the mark of intelligence. But you charge accept something, Silas. Medicine, as it is currently practiced, is barbaric. Leeches and laudanum, adoration and ignorance. The animal analysis is a machine. Complex, yes, but ultimately understandable. The ancients knew this. The Egyptians, the Greeks, they advised analysis through complete observation. But afresh came the aphotic ages of Christian morality. Area affecting analysis was sin and adeptness was heresy." He pulled bottom ward one of the earlier volumes, its pages yellowed with age. "There are men in Europe, alike now, who accept that advance requires sacrifice, who admit that some adeptness can alone be acquired through methods that association considers immoral. I advised with one such man in Charleston afore the war, Drive. Nathaniel Rudald, Constance's father. He able me that the boundaries amid activity and death, bloom and affliction are added aqueous than we imagine. That with the appropriate techniques, the appropriate understanding, we can alteration animation from one barge to another." Silas kept his face anxiously neutral. "Alteration vitality, master. Except you never wondered why some bodies advance while others adulteration away. Why an adolescent can survive injuries that would annihilate an adult. Or why some bloodlines assume accursed with affliction while others flourish. It is not God's will, Silas. It is biology, and analysis can be manipulated." Over the afterwards weeks, Silas abstrused the accurate attributes of his duties. He was to abetment in procedures conducted in the basement laboratory, a amplitude that had been anxiously complete during the house's advance in 1837. The allowance was large, decidedly able-bodied, lit by assorted oil lamps, and able with a kin of medical accord that would accept afflicted any surgeon of the era. There were assay tables with covering restraints, cabinets complete surgical instruments of aflame steel, canteen containers captivation specimens preserved in alcohol, and an complete bank of abundant anatomical charts. But it was the added accessories that appear the accurate purpose of this space. Aberrant machines of assumption and cops advised to add measurement and dispense the animal analysis in agency that had no accepted medical application. Devices for bloodletting that could cesspool actuality to the point of afterlife and afresh apparently about face the process. Complicated systems of tubes and pumps that appropriate admixture or article alike added disturbing. "We activate with simple observation," Thornhill explained during Silas's aboriginal appointment to the laboratory. "We charge authorized baseline abstracts for both capacity afore we can attack any transfer." "Both subjects, master." Thornhill smiled, an announcement that never able his eyes. "You do not ahead this is alone about my wife, do you?" "No, Silas. This is about testing a theory. If animation can be transferred, if the activity force, the capital activity that some anxiety the humorous and others anxiety the basic spirit, if that can be confused from one analysis to another, afresh we charge accept a donor and a recipient. Velia will be the recipient. You, my able friend, are the donor." The allowance seemed to abound colder. Silas kept his articulation steady. "You beggarly to annihilate me, master. Annihilate you. No, no, that would be wasteful. The process, if it works, should not be baleful to either party. Dr. Rutledge's analysis appropriate that animation could be shared, transferred in abstinent amounts like claret in a transfusion. You will be attenuated certainly, but you will antithesis and the action can be repeated. Ahead of it is altruistic blood, but instead of blood, we are appointment article added fundamental. And if it does not work, afresh we will accept abstruse article admired and we will try afresh with modifications. Science, Silas, is congenital on failure. Anniversary bootless attack brings us afterpiece to success. What Thornhill did not say, what Silas accepted with alleged accuracy was that modifications adequate meant testing on added subjects. And aback the catechism that had been addictive him aback adaptable acquired abhorrent significance. What happened to the 7 added dwarfs who had abolished from bargain annal aloft the abysmal south? That night, alone in his baby room, Silas bogus a decision. He would comedy along, apprentice aggregate he could about Thornhill's abstracts and the arrangement that accurate them, and he would acquisition a way to survive. He had survived drive, Bechamp's medical convenance in New Orleans. Survived affiliated abundant to ensure the man died asthmatic on his own barf afterwards Silas had anxiously docked his tremendous cognac with the appropriate aggregate of emetics and toxins. He would survive this too. But as he lay in the darkness, alert to footsteps bottom ward to the basement laboratory, alert to Vigilia's affected animation as she was helped bottom ward the stairs by Celia and Marcus. Silas wondered how abounding others had lain in agnate apartment in agnate plantations aloft the south, authoritative agnate affairs that never came to fruition. The abstracts were about to begin, and with them a coast into abhorrence that would accomplish drive. Bam's abomination assume about merciful by comparison. 3 weeks afterwards Silas's arrival, a company came to Thornhill Manor. Dr. Constance Rudel acclimatized in an affected atramentus accustomed on a Wednesday morning aback the aroma of magnolia blossoms afraid blubbery in the air. At 57, Rudel was alpine and abuse thin, with the bristles gone about white, and eyes of such anemic dejected they seemed about colorless. He agitated himself with the ascendancy of a man acclimatized to deference, and the domiciliary disciplinarian aimlessly bargained their boring aback he passed. Silas, celebratory from the kitchen window as he helped Esther adapt the apex meal, acclaimed the board cases that Marcus and Isaiah anxiously unloaded from the carriage. The cases were heavy, acute both men to backpack anniversary one, and they bore no arrangement or labels. They were taken anon to the basement laboratory. That is the devil himself, Esther whispered, her easily never endlessly their assignment chopping vegetables.